We are live on the air at the High Point Sioux Falls studio in South Dakota.
I love it.
Very good. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm going to start out today with a question for our listeners. So, what if you got up tomorrow morning and you got the dreaded call that your systems had been compromised? Would you know what to do?
And more importantly, would your leadership team?
Excellent point, because, when a breach happens, and they will, the clock starts ticking right away.
So today we're breaking down what leaders need to know before that moment ever comes. This is
Get to the Point. Welcome to Get to the Point, the podcast where we talk to real IT people about real IT, and we try and dig in a little bit deeper to the why behind the tech that surrounds us all. And we try to make it a little bit more humid. That's funny. Let's not make it more humid. We can make it more human. I'm Andy Middlemiss.
And I'm Brandi Mentele. Joining us today is Shawn Mendel, the Director of Professional Services here at High Point Networks. Hi, Shawn.
Hello.
With nearly 30 years of experience, Shawn, in the industry, 15 of those as an engineer, you lead our professional services team here at High Point Networks, which is a group of over 80 highly skilled professionals. You are our go-to incident response manager, which means that if a breach happens, whether it's at High Point Networks or with one of our customers, you are the one leading the charge. Thank you again for being here today, Shawn. Tell me something good.
Tell you something good. Well, this is really good news. Yesterday, I was at the office going about my day, and right at lunchtime, my daughter showed up with my grandson, who's 5 months old now, and we got to have lunch together. So just made my day.
Super fun.
Love it. Well, I actually happened to come in at the perfect time yesterday from my lunch break, and I got to see him too. He is a sweetheart. You are one lucky grandparent. So
you get a little baby lunchtime too.
I did.
That's a beautiful thing.
Love a little baby time.
Beautiful thing. Shawn, got a little affirmation for you. You have kind of picked up a reputation in a good way. Don't be concerned. With the cyber insurance folks and the forensics people around incident responses. With sort of a calm, cool, collected approach to it. And I think that the people that we talk to, we get calls from customers all the time. And again, this reputation that you've started to earn with the other folks who participate in these things, I think is really cool. I've experienced that actually myself. I called you last fall. It was Saturday morning. I think you were out at a lake somewhere, and you took the time to walk me through what to do because my wife's identity had been stolen the day before, and I was in a panic, but you just had this very calm, cool approach to it, and I really appreciate the way that you handled that, and you helped me through it. So
I was happy to help.
Good stuff.
Love it.
So today we're getting to the point of what leaders need to know about today's threat landscape and what's vital to have in place to prevent or minimize these kinds of incidents. But also what the response and recovery actually looks like when these things happen, and they will, unfortunately. We'd also like to touch on, or at least start the conversation about AI and its play in this, because it's evolving so rapidly in the IT space. So that's what we'd like to touch on today.
Yeah, Shawn, kick us off. What are we up against?
Well, we're up against cyber criminals, those that attack us personally, like Andy's story, as well as attacking organizations and businesses. That they do that through multiple different methods. We kind of see three common ones. The first being an external remote access, where they brute force their way in by trying commonly used passwords on different accounts, or they will password spray, which means using multiple accounts, but with one password. And then they also will use previously compromised credentials, because if you watch the headlines, you see there's compromises happening all the time. And so the threat actors gain access to that information, and then they will use that. There's also the exploiting known vulnerabilities. If you have a system in place, for example, that will allow us remote access, and that particular device or solution has a known vulnerability that hasn't been addressed and patched, the threat actors can then exploit that and gain access to the environment through that. And then also user action. Humans are easy to trick. And so, they may trick a user by doing a phishing campaign, tricking them into downloading malicious code or a file, as well as, users don't always do the best password practices. So if they're not, using best practices when it comes to password management, using things like multi-factor authentication, then the human can also be vulnerable and be an attack vector for the threat actors.
I think we've got some segments coming up on a future episode to deal with some of this human element stuff. It's a hard one to deal with because you can't solve it with technology.
Right.
So tell us a little bit about what are the statistics around this kind of thing. I mean, ransomware is obviously a big deal. What are the other factors, and what are the stats tell us these days?
Well, I'll cover really two main, threat attack types that we see: ransomware, as you mentioned, and then business email compromise. And then we just have a category of breach. So starting with ransomware, about 43% of the time, with the cases that we've been a part of, we see ransomware attacks be successful. Business email compromise, 35% of the time. Where a threat actor has gained access to a company via their email, whether it's taking over an account or pretending to be someone they're not. And then a general breach may happen. What that may look like, and that's 22% of the time. That could be where the threat actor gained access to the network and maybe just stole some data. Maybe they attempted to do a ransomware attack but weren't successful because of the other security tools that are in place. But they were able to gain access to the network, and they were successful in getting on there. And the impact of that will depend greatly on what they were able to do. And then the attack vectors that we see in these cases that we've been a part of, 39% of the time, it's due to this weak authentication. Those password practices not being followed, no multi-factor authentication, those sort of things. 24% of the time, it's those vulnerabilities that I talked about, where there's a known vulnerability with a system, it didn't get patched in time, and the threat actor was able to exploit that. And then, believe it or not, sometimes we just don't know. Even in the case where forensic firms are brought in, 37% of the time, it's either some sort of other attack outside of the weak authentication or vulnerabilities, or we simply just don't know. Some threat actors are better than others, and they're able to clean up after themselves pretty well. So sometimes at the end of the day, we really just don't know, which is also kind of scary when you're trying to prevent it for the next time.
Yeah. Hard, if you don't learn something from it the first go around, hard to protect the next time, right?
Very hard, yes.
Interesting. All right, what else?
Well, what else? We can get into some ransomware details if you'd like.
I would be curious to know what that kind of looks like.
All right. Well, the first thing to note is ransomware isn't new. Any guess on when the first ransomware attack was noted?
2 weeks ago.
Well, we've seen some in the last 2 weeks,
Okay.
but no,
All
the
right.
first one was actually 1989.
That's crazy.
And that was executed by just distribution of a floppy disk. So that's when it kind of started. However, we didn't really start to see it come back around till the 2000s, but we didn't see it much then. But the 2010s, it really started to pick up a pace then. In 2010, you had some changes. You had the internet, stronger encryptions, coming into play where data could be encrypted much stronger. You had cryptocurrencies being utilized, a method for the threat actors to collect payments, ransom payments, without being tracked. That started to play a role. You have the ransomware as a service that came into play, where now a bad guy doesn't have to know anything. He can just simply rent the tools needed to carry out these attacks, which then it kind of broadened the pool of number of bad guys who could launch these attacks. We started to see more smaller organizations be impacted. It might have been just a small company and the ask was only $300. We started to see that happen in that time frame. And then techniques started to improve and the bad guys got better at what they're doing. And then the 2020s, we saw another component added to this attack, and that was the extortion component. And how that was carried out is the threat actors will gain access to the environment. They will exfiltrate all the customer's data, then encrypt it. So now they kind of have this two different, attacks going on at once, essentially, where they request a ransom to get your data back, and then if you're not willing to do that, they'll say, well, we have your data and we're going to sell it or share it if you don't pay us a ransom. So they kind of have you twice in that single attack and trying to, get a ransom, two different methods in the same attack.
Yeah, interesting. So let me drill in on something you said, this better encryption technology. I assume you're talking about for the threat actors
Correct.
to use to encrypt your data, not to protect someone from getting your data.
Yeah, they're able to encrypt it, making it impossible to decrypt without that key that they have, that they hold.
Okay, very interesting. Mm-hmm. Very interesting. What about other things beside just ransomware? Let me take a left turn for a second. So this ransomware thing to me is interesting. You hear, governments talk about, we don't negotiate with terrorists, right?
Right.
Is that becoming more of a theme? I'm curious, in today's environment, what percentage of companies are actually paying a ransom versus not?
Yeah. Well, fortunately for the cases that we've been a part of, that number is very, very low. We've had great success in assisting organizations with doing a full recovery or close to a full recovery with very little data loss. There's obviously been some time lost in the process, but we see it to be very, very low, which is a good thing, because hopefully if we can continue to keep these low, just maybe they'll give up. But we're definitely not seeing that. We're still seeing it happen, unfortunately, at this time. But paying the ransom is only going to encourage the behavior.
Yeah, very good. All right, good. I think that wraps up ransom. Any other questions on that or comments on the whole ransomware thing?
Well, I think I'd like to know what a business can expect if they fall victim to that kind of attack. Like, what are we looking at? I mean, first of all, when you mentioned ransomware as a service, I shook my head because I'm like, how creative. It's, obviously nefarious, but
you don't even have to know
creative.
anything.
Not that I'm going to look into that or anything, but what should a business expect if they fall victim to something like this, Shawn?
Well, the first step in figuring out what to figure that out or what to expect is to understand your insurance policy. We do see that most organizations now do have cyber insurance. We come across a few that don't, but it's fairly common that they do. But few of them don't necessarily understand it fully and know what to expect in the event that they need to use it. So our first advice is to understand your policy. What can you expect from your insurance company? For example, if you call them because you have an active attack going on, who are they going to involve? Are they going to bring in a law firm? They generally do. Are they going to bring in a forensics team? They generally do. Who's that team going to be? What all are they going to provide? Are they going to provide a negotiator? Are they going to provide recovery services? Who are they willing to pay for the time it takes to help with this recovery? Are they going to let you work with an organization that you maybe already work with? Or are they going to essentially financially force you to work with someone who doesn't know your environment, who they want you to work with? And so that's caught a few of our customers off guard a little bit at times, not knowing exactly what to expect, who's all going to be brought into this. Didn't understand that, the rates they're willing to pay. Some customers have found themselves left with paying the delta between what it really costs to do the recovery versus, what the insurance company is willing to pay, especially down to an hourly rate. And so that's understanding your insurance is really, really important. Also, and this is unfortunately the truth of an attack of this caliber, is you can expect to have what we consider a hard downtime of 3 to 5 days, where systems are not accessible, and that 3 to 5 days is assuming that you have a good backup and a way to recover in an efficient manner. There's just it takes time. There's some forensics investigation that has to take place. You can't really start doing a whole lot until that's at least started or complete, at least the gathering of that evidence. So there's a little bit of delay that takes place there. There may be a delay even getting all these parties involved initially. So we've seen where it could take 90 minutes to get everyone on a call to get this started, or it could take 2 days. Again, one of those things to ask your insurance company is, what is it that we can expect if we call you because we're having an event. And then, at the end of the day, the whole process, it's going to be a 3 to 6 weeks typically before things are somewhat back to normal. So you can expect, hundreds, in most cases, hundreds of hours of time, whether that be from your internal IT staff in conjunction with, the third parties that are helping. It's going to be hundreds of hours, and it's going to be a multi-week process to get things back to somewhat normal.
So falling victim to a ransomware attack is expensive, even if you don't pay the ransom, is what you're saying.
Absolutely.
A lot of business loss and
business downtime, the hours for your staff to be involved. It can be a 24/7 process at times. Because companies want to get back up and running as fast as they can, and so there's definitely lots of costs involved in that. You're going to have lots of third parties involved here. I mentioned the forensics teams, the legal counsel, law enforcement at times, and even some other government agencies at times have actually reached out to us in the midst of these attacks because they're seeing things happening. So lots of folks get involved when these incidents occur.
Wow. Something I just want to make sure that I hone in on. You mentioned it briefly, but just hearing all this, it gets my heart pumping a little bit, right? Like I don't want to be in this position, right? And I think that's something that I think you mentioned a little bit was just being prepared and understanding, calling your insurance company, understanding what to expect, preparing people internally for when this does happen and kind of practicing or doing a run through so that and so that when that does happen to you, you're still going to have downtime. You're still going to, I don't want people to think that that's not the case, but I think just being a little bit more prepared for it and knowing what to expect is key. I think that's something you touched on. I just want to hone in on that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. We strongly encourage all organizations to do a tabletop exercise internally. Walk through a scenario. Get all the parties in the organization that would be involved in that, so you can walk through a real scenario, so everyone understands what their part in that is, and it helps identify gaps. It helps you identify, we weren't prepared for that. We don't know who takes care of that. We don't know what that looks like, and so it allows you to get a little bit of practice running through an event, as well as identify gaps within your process, so that in the event it does happen, you're more prepared, and things can move along a little quicker, and hopefully get you running faster.
Back to kind of the human element again.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Let's shift gears a little bit. I know we've talked a lot about ransomware. You mentioned email compromise as well. Tell us a little bit about email compromise.
Yeah, email compromise is probably that second most common attack that we see. It's an email-borne attack, a form of fraud, where a couple different methods of that. The first, probably most common one that we see is someone's email account being taken over by a threat actor, where they're able to gain access to the account, and then they are essentially being that person. So to think of that, someone within a financial role within a company who's commonly transferring funds or moving money around, that sort of thing. If the threat actor can become that person, then now they can start redirecting those funds. We've seen cases where an organization was working with a construction company who was doing work on their site, and the threat actor was able to get the payment for the construction project, which was, of course, in the hundreds of thousands, redirected to a threat actor through a business email compromise. Also, threat actors pretending to be someone who's trusted by using an email address that looks very, very close to the real person. And so they haven't actually hacked anything. They simply have sent an email to someone. That person receiving the email believes it's their coworker or someone within their organization, and they are following instructions that they are given, which may be routing funds, routing information, whatever it is the threat actor is after.
Yeah, hard to detect. A lot of clever disguises there, and some of them, as you said, they're actually in someone's account. So,
right.
I mean, what else can you do to protect yourself? in that type of case. So these things are really, really hard to catch.
They are hard to catch. Users need to just look for anything that isn't usual. Look for anything that's unique. Maybe in the language that the person's emailing you is using. Is that normally how that person sends you emails? Look for differences. Also, have internal processes in place, especially when it comes to sending money. Have a process in place where you have multiple people who have eyes on that transaction prior to it taking place to ensure that more than one person is looking that over before it's sent out.
Yeah, that's a really good suggestion. I mean, just on the technology side, we've got multi-factor authentication to protect us from someone else getting into a device or into a system that we're not supposed to be. But most companies probably don't have an MFA kind of double check for things like, hey, let's transfer $100,000 off to this account,
off
right?
To Nigerian prince.
It's kind of shocking, but
right. So yeah, strongly encourage the internal processes that help identify these attacks before they're successful.
Yeah, and I think to someone out there listening right now, it doesn't matter if you're in technology or not. I mean, I think it's just that extra step. We're so quick to get things done in this day and age, and everything's so fast, right? And I think it's just that little extra step that extra second that might help you catch something that maybe looks a little off. So I feel like we're only covering half the story though, Shawn. Yeah.
I think that is just half the story.
It is half the story. I mean, we're going to pause here, Shawn. I think we're going to pick this up in part 2, and we're going to shift from understanding kind of the threats into what that response and recovery look like and what the role of AI kind of plays in this now too. We hear a lot about AI. I think everyone's maybe a little sick of hearing about AI, but I think it's important in this particular conversation. So
yeah, I'd be interested to hear more about AI and its evolution in this space. This is, I think, what we call a cliffhanger. We're gonna pick this up in the next episode. And if you're responsible for decision making or strategy around this kind of a topic, you don't want to miss what comes next. So stay tuned. Hit the subscribe button. It's down there somewhere.
I feel like whoever is in charge of the subscribe button needs to move it, because every time you point down,
and it's probably not even going to be there.
Just
right? Yeah.
wherever you point, I want it opposite, just for comical purposes. Yes,
okay.
yes.
And follow us on all the social media outlets. We're on. We'll be on LinkedIn. We'll be on Instagram. We'll be on Facebook. Or you can look for new episode alerts at highpointnetworks.com. Thank you for being here. And remember, we'll always be here to help you get to the point. Have a great day.